Fellow New Yorkers, we are in a crisis situation. New York City now has more than 61,000 people in our shelter system. That includes thousands of New Yorkers experiencing homelessness and thousands of asylum seekers who have been bussed in over the past few months from other parts of the country. This is a humanitarian crisis that started with violence and instability in South America, and it is being accelerated by American political dynamics. Thousands of asylum seekers have been bussed into New York City and simply dropped off without notice, coordination, or care.
Today, the mayor of New York City, Eric Adams, declared a state of emergency. The city's homeless shelters are in crisis. The reason for this can be found in the state of Texas, where the Republican governor, Greg Abbott, has been engaging in a political stunt for several months now. He's been busing thousands of migrants and asylum seekers to Democratic-run cities, refusing to give them notice or to coordinate with city officials, and intentionally overwhelming the shelter system, all while endangering thousands of people who are really just looking for safety in America, using human beings as pawns to essentially own the libs. Mayor Adams said that so far more than 17,000 migrants have arrived in New York City since April, and now he's desperate for help from state and federal governments. Adams is not alone in this. A month ago, the Democratic mayor of Washington, D.C., Muriel Bowser, she declared a public emergency for the same reason. Governor Abbott and Arizona Governor Doug Ducey, also a Republican, they've been busing thousands of asylum seekers to that city to create chaos. Even Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has joined in on the game, flying about 50 migrants to Martha's Vineyard with no notice. For people who have watched all of this from afar, it's become a national outrage. But despite that, despite the strain on city systems and the legal challenges and the calls for federal investigations and just the staggering cruelty of this whole thing, these Republican political stunts are not slowing down. Just yesterday, another bus carrying about 50 migrants from Texas arrived outside of Vice President Kamala Harris's D.C. residence. That's the second time in a month. In September, a bus carrying about 100 asylum seekers and migrants stopped outside of her house. And today, we spoke to one of the men who was on one of those first buses in September. His name is Alfredo. We are not reporting his full name for the sake of his privacy and his security, but Alfredo began his journey from the U.S. to the U.S. from Venezuela months ago, walking by foot through 8 different countries to reach the American border in Texas. Can you first tell me why you left Venezuela?
I worked with the government of Venezuela, and I witnessed the government do things that I don't think they had to do. And I denounced them, and that caused me problems. And I had to rush out of the country in fear of my life. The Venezuelan government was going to take my life.
Alfredo says that he passed through jungles with snakes and crocodiles. He says he saw the bodies of women with their children and bodies of the elderly. This journey was so harrowing, he says, that if someone's leg broke, they might not survive it. Along the way, Alfredo claims that he was shot at in Honduras and robbed by police in Mexico. By his estimation, he walked for 40 days. This is some of the footage from his journey. He got sores all over his legs and feet. As a diabetic, he had to inject himself with insulin, which he carried throughout his journey. There were moments, he told me, when he thought he would die. I asked Alfredo about his experience when he finally arrived in the U.S. at one of the detention centers in Governor Abbott's state of Texas.
I don't like to talk about politics, but that man is a bad person because he treats us bad. They put us in a refrigerator, in a tent that's so cold, with no clothes, and they take away our documents, and they take everything from us. To me, he's a bad person. God forgive me. What I'm saying is, I can't talk about politics, but that man, the position he has, he doesn't deserve, because he just doesn't treat immigrants well.
Alfredo was soon swept up in Governor Abbott's political stunt. He was placed on a bus bound for Vice President Harris's residence. Do you know about why you were sent to the vice president's home?
Because the governor of Texas doesn't like Venezuelans, and he put them on buses. We were made to ride 40 hours without being able to use a restroom and without anything. He doesn't want anyone to stay in Texas. What he wants is to get them out of the state, and they sent us to Washington, D.C.
Did someone tell you you would meet the vice president? What did they tell you when you got on the bus?
No, they never told me I was going to meet the vice president, but they brought me from Texas to D.C., which was 40 hours of travel, and I thought, and my friend, that they would receive us, but who met us was a charity group, and they took us in.
Alfredo and dozens of men, women, and children were dropped off outside the U.S. Naval Observatory in September at dawn, unannounced and with no one there to greet them. They stood there outside holding the few belongings that they brought with them. After local charities and volunteers scrambled to make last-minute arrangements, they ended up at a local church. Eventually, those charities bought Alfredo a ticket to New York City, where he thought he might be better off. When Alfredo arrived at the Port Authority in New York City 3 weeks ago, he was greeted by members of an aid group named Team TLC, a grassroots organization that's been receiving the asylum seekers and helping them get set up. And Alfredo is now staying at one of the city-run homeless shelters where he's met other migrants like him who fled to this country to escape violence and persecution. This twisted saga could end here, and it would be overwhelming. But in the last week, a new chapter has unfolded. Alfredo says that he and other migrants staying at that shelter have been asked by an undisclosed third party to help repair hurricane damage in the state of Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis' state. Now, America has had a long history of migrants leading cleanup efforts after natural disasters. But it has not had a long history of migrants being used as political pawns by governors in states that later need the help of those very same political pawns. Alfredo says many of his friends agreed to travel to Florida after they were offered $15 an hour plus housing and 3 meals a day, which sounds a lot better than what they've been offered thus far, which is basically nothing. But that, too, might be a pretty big risk for these migrants because they're paid off the books. And historically, migrants have been victims of wage theft while working on recovery efforts. And Alfredo, having been through this just extraordinary ordeal, aware of the degree to which his life has become part of a sick political stunt, he chose not to go down to Florida. Why didn't you go to Florida?
Because in reality, my destination was New York. I know they're working too, but me, I thought these might have been fake people that would put me to work and then possibly not pay me and exploit my work. That's what I thought.
Even in the best case scenario here, the migrants are actually able to get paid for their work rebuilding the state of Florida. There is still a potentially massive legal concern. Many of them are awaiting immigration court dates here in New York that will determine when they can legally work in the U.S. An off-the-books job could end in deportation. Working in another part of the country might mean missing that court date here in New York, which could also end in deportation. So now you're separated from your family and you're seeking asylum in the United States. Your court date is in New York?
Yes, my court date is here. It's the 2nd of November at 11 a.m.
November 2nd is soon. For your friends who went down to Florida, do you know where their court dates are? Are they in New York as well?
I don't know for sure if they have court dates, but yes, they should have them right here in New York. I think they're probably also afraid because we are here practically like we're under arrest. We have freedom, but with conditions. I too am afraid that tomorrow or the next day they want to deport or send me back to my country, and then they take my life. What I don't want to do is to go back to Venezuela because it's certain they could execute me.
Risking your life to come to the United States, only to be used in a political game by a Republican governor, and then risking it all again to help rebuild a state run by another governor who is all too keen to dehumanize you as well. That is what is happening with these asylum seekers, the ones crossing the border. That is what they have to tell their families about when they ask what life is like here in the United States. Have you talked to your wife? Have you told her what you've been through? And how does she feel about where you are?
Yes, I speak to my wife every day, and in reality, it was a very tough experience. I tell her not to cross, but she wants to come here, and I want my family to be here with me too. So she's going to make the same journey I made, and hopefully she comes soon. But she will make the same journey as me, and I feel bad because she will come alone and with my 2 daughters, and it will be tough for her.
We'll be right back.